专业名家汇集，市场大势解析，投资痛点事宜，时下热点直击。欢迎收看房东网名家讲坛。
大家好，这里是58Home 房东网名家讲坛。名家讲坛致力用专业的态度、专业的角度、专业的声音，解决村友的困惑和痛点。So we trust that you are a pretty successful coaching person there. So we talk another important area that recently you are doing pretty great on the risk. It's called the Real Estate Investment Trust.
Right.
Share some background information about that.
Yeah, so we have two trusts. One of them is a real estate development trust, and the other is the real estate income trust. And so the way it works is we have some projects that are in the development trust. And this is where we talked about goals. What is the purpose of this property? What are you going to do with it?
Right.
You need to know that when you're acquiring it. Projects that we're going to build for resale go in our development trust. So we buy them in the development trust. We have investors that come into the development trust. They give us their, registered funds or cash, and they earn equity in the deal. So as we're building it and then we go to sell it, they become our equity partners. So this is what I said about the owner versus loaner.
Right.
So they are owners in the project, in the development trust. And then in our REIT, in our income trust, these are projects that we're building with the intention of keeping. So we have 5 projects on the go right now, all across southwestern Ontario. And we're building them with an affordability and accessibility model. We really want to build senior housing for our aging population, and we want to build affordable housing. So what we're doing is our projects at a minimum have 25% to 40% of all units being affordable. So what that means is it's below market rent. And because we use that strategy, we're able to work with the government, with CMHC, and we're able to get involved in better funding, better financing. And we talked about that earlier, but we get better funding, which makes us break even in theory, or a little bit more. We've got some strategies around how we make more money, and that's through our commercial space. But the residential things that we're doing in the REIT, people invest, they get the benefit of the developments, all of those development projects, because we're building brand new units. And so as we refinance them, it injects money into the REIT, and that comes back to our investors, right? And then once we stabilize, because this is a 4-year plan, once we stabilize in year 4 and we do our refinances around year 5, people are making, during that period, their average return is about 15%. 15%.
So 15%.
15 to 18. We've got some projects that are higher than others, but the lowest is about 15%. And there's a couple that are closer to 18. So we'll just say an average of 15 to 18%, depending on the project. And so what this does, though, is allows people to be an owner. They're an owner of all these developments, and we're building 281 units in the income trust. So when they're all developed and cash flowing, they now own a piece of a 281 unit portfolio because they're owners, and then they get cash distributions every single month, and they can use registered funds or cash. With the registered funds, it just builds your retirement fund, right? You're building your retirement fund. I said registered funds are sleeping giants. You can set them aside. You can invest in an investment that's going to give you a healthy return greater than that 5% or the loss that you may have incurred in the last couple of years, and put them in development deals. For investors, the really great thing about it is it allows you to diversify your portfolio, because we have 5 different projects in it. You're not investing in just one project. You're investing in a portfolio. And it ranges from 8 units in one project to 171. So it depends on what the project is. Each year we add more units to the portfolio. until in year 4, we're done 281 of them. So it's an exciting time for us. We did it in a mutual fund trust, which is what our REIT is, the income trust, and then the development trust. So it's been an exciting year. And that's how we were able to transition from dealing with all of the construction financing.
Right.
Is we
That's
did
back to the point.
It goes back to the point.
Right.
Yeah. Is we
Right.
our investors supply us with construction financing.
You're talking about the 2 different type of funds there. Right? In terms of the portfolios, how would you manage those portfolios there? Or those, with the 2 different type of funds?
Yeah, so we treat them differently. One of them is in the development trust. It's very project specific. So
Right.
somebody invests in that project,
Right.
right? And when the project is over, they get their capital returned to them and they get their profits.
Right.
In the portfolio that's the income trust, that's where we have 5 projects across
Right.
southwestern Ontario. You're going to stay in this deal. You're going to stay in it. You don't get distributions for the first few years. But going forward, you're going to have cash flow.
Right.
You're going to have a nice cash flow. You can take the cash flow
Right.
or you can reinvest it and compound your return, which is also a nice way to sort of build your portfolio.
Right.
A lot of people, want properties, but they can't afford a whole portfolio.
Right.
This gives anybody.
This gives them the opportunity to participate in.
Yeah, and not for very much either. Like the REIT, the minimum investment is $5,000, and what we're doing for families is if you want to invest $5,000, which is the minimum,
Right.
and you have children, your children can come in and trust underneath you for only $500.
Got
So
it.
because what we want to do is we want
it,
to
yeah.
teach
Right.
families and build wealth within families and we also want investing to be affordable and accessible for everybody. Our buildings are affordable and accessible,
Right.
and we want investing to be affordable and accessible. So that's why our REIT has a lower sort of entry point,
Right,
so
right.
that anybody can do it. And they don't need to be accredited, they don't need to be a qualified investor.
Right.
They can invest up to $10,000 a year, and their children can invest starting at $500,
Right,
and then they
right.
can just add whatever they want in the future.
As long as initial entry point is 5,000.
Exactly.
Right.
And you can add more each year. It's the returns are really good, at 15 to 18%.
18%.
Yeah, the development trust is a little bit higher.
Right.
It's
because it's riskier, right?
They're riskier. It's and it doesn't generate any income in the future. So it's a build and sell.
Right.
The development trust, but that's the
Right.
opportunity as well. And those are 2 or 3 year projects, so you don't have a huge commitment. It's just a couple of years or a few years, and once those projects are done, you get your money back, you get your return, and
Right.
you can start over and do another project because we always have more projects. Right now, we have hundreds of investors that have been working with us for years, and but what is new is we always had lenders. We
Right.
had loaners before, and now they're transitioning into owning part of our portfolio as well.
Right.
So they've moved over to the owner status rather than just being a loaner. So that's kind of fun. It's kind of nice to help other people create that generational wealth for themselves as well.
So in terms of managing those portfolios of the 2 type of funds there, how would you control the risks that make sure that the funds are performing or developing well there?
Yeah, so we're governed by the Securities Commission, and we also have our controller, director of operations, those
Right.
folks that manage that. We have a very good accounting team
Right.
and legal team that does that stuff for us. We also have a trustee. We have a trustee in the REIT, and we're actually getting an external and independent trustee as well that oversees the performance. They oversee it. They make sure that there's like third-party sort of audits.
Right.
We have audits every single year, and every quarter we go through another sort of preliminary audit with a third-party accounting firm. So we have our accounting firm that manages us internally, and then it goes out to a third party. And they do all their due diligence and their checks and balances and whatnot to make sure that we're following all of the rules and the guidelines of the Securities Commission, because that's legislation, and because we want to make sure that everything that we do is adding value and not putting people at risk. Right. So that's really important. We have, cost actuaries. We have people that make sure that you're on budget, and that we have cost analysts that throughout the project they're analyzing how much you're spending and whether you're getting the value out of that spend. So there's a lot of numbers people, financial people involved in their roles. I've hired very good people. I don't have to worry about that piece of it.
Professional people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Accredited people and people that are licensed. Licensed to sell securities. We have an exempt market dealer that we work with as well. And they handle our REIT. They handle the qualification of the people that are getting in there to ensure that the investment is aligned to their goals, because not everybody should invest depending on where they are in their life, right? It's important that people don't put all their money in one investment. If you have, $10,000, for example, I don't want all of it. I want you to put 5,000 here and 5,000 somewhere else.
In other words, don't put all the eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Yeah.
Diversify it.
Diversify, and that's where the exempt market dealer is really important, because they help know your client and help qualify whether your client is oversaturated. You never want too much of one person's money. So we have a lot of people on our team that make sure that that doesn't happen. And we also have a very professional team. I'd love to just mentally calculate how many years of experience they all have collectively. It's hundreds of years of experience when we add all of our experience together. So yeah, I think it's the team. It's the team that helps manage the portfolio, and the external folks. The trustees, the exempt market dealer, the auditors, all of those folks.
And talking about the auditing there, that as you mentioned, that on the annual basis or even on a quarterly basis, we would assume those are the auditors from the third party, right?
They
from
are
outside, right? But how, on top of it, how often the investors can get their report? Is it on a monthly basis? Or?
It's on an annual basis. We do an annual basis, an annual report, but on a quarterly basis, they'll get updates. They'll have updates on what's going on in the project. Sometimes when you hear nothing, it's because nothing's happening, right? But you don't want to hear nothing for too long, So I think it's important that on a quarterly basis, we have calls with our investors every 2 weeks. So we have a private discussion for our lenders. It's called our private lending discussion. Any of our investors want to know about the project, they can join us every other Friday in a private discussion. And
to keep them updated.
Keep them updated. Let them know what's going on with their money, because at the end of the day, they're building a community. And so they have the opportunity to ask questions as well. How are we doing on this one? What's going on with that? And anytime there's a substantial change in a project, for example, we get a new mortgage, we want our lenders to know. We want them to know whether there's more debt on the project or whether there's more revenue on the project or whatnot.
So that they're in the loop, right?
Yeah, keep them in the loop. So every 2 weeks we have that private lending discussion for our investors. And then on a quarterly basis, it's more of a, hey, how's the portfolio doing? And then on an annual basis, it's a report.
So in terms of some special cases, even for some investors to say, hey, I want to exit, right? And are there any restrictions on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in our development trust, you can't exit. It's a 2 or 3 year deal, depending on the project. It's a limited partnership.
Right.
We expect our partners to stay with us till the end of the journey, until the project is completed.
Right.
If, however, you had a life event, say there's been the loss of a spouse,
Right.
or a critical illness or something like that.
Or even some matrimonial, whatever.
Exactly.
Those, yeah.
You would have to come to us, and if the funds were available, understand that these funds aren't sitting around
Right.
in the bank account doing nothing. They're
Right.
actually out to work.
Right.
They're out doing the project and building the project. So we would have to replace that individual, right? In the REIT, you can redeem. There are redemption rights. However, in the beginning, there's redemption fees. So you're
Right.
better off. The highest return you're ever going to get in is if you can stay in for 5 years.
Right.
So if you stay in for 5 years, you're going to get the highest return. If you start exiting throughout that time, you're going to have a redemption fee. Right? So it's important that you understand the contract. But if you have a life event, a life circumstance, I'm not going to say, oh, you want to buy a new boat? Okay, let me go find that money. You're in this opportunity until a certain time till the project's completed. But the REIT is a little bit more flexible. You do have redemption rights. You can exit. It'll be your personal choice whether you choose to or not, depending on the fees. Right? And the fee structure goes down over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So in
Along the project.
in the beginning, there may be a redemption fee of 7%. At the end, it's only 1%. Right? So you can decide, maybe I can wait another 6 months, or maybe I can wait till the end of the project, but it'll be up to you how you manage that. But certainly you can exit it if you have a life event, or if you just want to. Right? So imagine you're 3 years in and you're like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd rather wait. You're not going to get the great return though, because remember, these are 3 and 4 year projects, and you want that refinance to come in so you can get that really big lift in that active appreciation, right? The longer you wait in this particular portfolio, 4 or 5 years, the more money you're going to make, and you're going to make good money. So, but we understand life happens and people want out, and they can certainly get out.
That's actually back to the term of discipline that we discussed before.
Exactly. Don't do it if you think you want to exit in a year or two from now, because it's not going to be to your financial benefit. You're not going to get the returns. In fact, it's going to be negative for you, and we don't want that for anybody. It has to be the right fit for you.
Right. Well, thank you. So we have a last minute here that if you're in front of our real estate investors, we would like to hear that what's your very sincere suggestion, comments, even some recommendations to our investors?
I think the biggest thing is build your team. Build your team. You're only as strong as your team is. So you need to have a good realtor. You need an investor-focused realtor, somebody that understands real estate investing, not your cousin or your uncle or somebody that's a family member that became a realtor last week, someone who has experience with investment properties. Okay, that's really important, because only about 1% of the realtors that are out there are investor-focused. Okay, there's thousands and thousands of realtors. A handful really understand real estate investing. Some are really great at selling properties. Others are not so great at understanding the numbers from an investor mindset. So that's one thing, is know your realtor, make sure they understand what your goals are, get a good investment lawyer, real estate lawyer, get a good mortgage broker, get a good insurance agent or insurance company. So it's really building that transactional team. The realtor, the mortgage broker, your lawyer, and your insurance. Those are the 4 most important people on your team. The next most important person on your team is your contractor. Right? They happen after the deal. right? Sometimes they happen at the beginning of the deal because they come in and they look at the property with you. They tell you what it's going to cost. Getting a really good home inspector on your team is important as well, so that you can just call them and say, hey, Adrienne, I've got this house I want you to look at. Sometimes I bring my home inspector when I'm looking at properties, not after I've put an offer in. I'll pay him for the day to come in, and he can tell me where I'm going to have the most problems and help me eliminate projects before I put an offer in. So I think sometimes it's your team that's the most important thing. When you build your team, and when you build your team, your transactions will be way smoother. They'll be way smoother. And I think my final tip is give yourself enough time. Even though the deal sounds good and it sounds sexy and it's like, I'm going to close in 30 days. Do you actually have time to gather your team and have them do all their work on your behalf? You may have the money for the down payment, but there's other people that are involved. So buying a property on December 20th and thinking you're closing January 2nd, people are away. So I think it's really important that you have constant communication with your team. My lawyer and I speak to each other probably 3 times a week, which is interesting because he's a very important person on my team. He gives me very strategic advice. It was him that said to me, I think you need to launch a REIT. I think you need to do this. You're at this time in your portfolio that strategically it's a better idea for you. And same with my accountants. So we had a big meeting, the accountants, the lawyers, the insurance people, and we sat down and said, let's make some strategic decisions around your portfolio so that from a tax perspective, I'm making more money. Okay, so and my accountant, super important on my team.
Right. So you're talking about building up your professional team there. And also that make sure that your team has adequate resources and time to work on your project there.
Exactly.
And on top of it, you're talking about the very effective communications as well. Make sure those are transparent.
And they know each other. My accountant has permission to speak to my lawyer. He has permission to reach out to him and say, hey, I'm looking at this. What do you think? What does this look like? So I've given them the autonomy to be part of my team and to communicate with each other so that I don't always need to be involved. They often make those decisions and come to me and say, this is the best decision for your portfolio. Are you okay with it? I have the ultimate last say, but they're an extension of my corporation. And I can tell you that when you respect those team members, even though they don't work for me per se as an employee, they're part of my team. They're part of my company in some way. And what they bring to the table for me is extraordinary. The way they save me money because they all know they're working together. I don't jump around from realtor to accountant to lawyer. I have established a core group of people that I work with. They have permission to communicate with each other. It's very crucial. Just recently I was doing a mortgage and my mortgage broker said, can we bring in the accountant and the lawyer? I said, sure. So we did an email and I just said, hey, I want to introduce you all to each other. It's the same people, but on that transaction, you have to give them permission. So I just sent an email and said, hey, we're doing this refinance on this property. Could you guys all work together? So what that means is I don't need to be in it. This is the whole who, not how. I don't need to know all the details. I just need to know that the people that are involved in my business understand each other and they're communicating well. For example, getting the new mortgage person who's lending me the money on the certificate of insurance. I didn't have to do any of that. My mortgage person spoke to the lawyer. The lawyer spoke to the insurance, said, can you get this for Judi? Make sure that this is on the certificate of insurance. Put the first lender on and the second lender. That, the lawyer went to the insurance company sends it back to the lawyer sends it to the mortgage broker, it's done. I'm not involved.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest thing is building your team, not just your construction team, your transactional team.
Yeah.
Because they're going to save you a ton of time and they're going to save you a ton of money.
Well, thank you so much, Judi, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And I appreciate all your excellent, very thoughtful, those comments, opinions, and even some recommendations.
Right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. 名家讲坛，真知灼见。希望我们今天的这期节目给大家一些启迪、一些思考。咱们下期再见。
专业名家汇集，市场大势解析，投资痛点事宜，时下热点直击。欢迎收看房东网名家讲坛。